Okay, students, today we're going to do Chapter 6, The Transformation of Rome. There will be a test next week on Chapters 5 and 6. So I want to cover this while we can. It'll be the same type of test. The test grades seem to be going up, which is very, very pleasing to me. Hope they're a little pleasing to you too. So we're going to start with the transformation of Rome, and what what we're going to cover is actually the emergence of Christianity. So you notice here a religious mosaic that all around Rome. Christianity made its rise in Rome because of the alternatives that it offered, one God versus many. But it was also seen as a political movement that was a threat to the Roman Empire, and we'll cover that in just a little bit. Um, what we know about Jesus is that, I've already explained the appeal of early Christianity to you. A lot of the things that we know about Jesus come from first century sources, which is 1 AD. He was born in Judea, which is right along the Mediterranean Sea. He was a preacher. He did a lot of healing. He did a lot of teaching. He was seen as a Messiah to a lot of people. To the Jews, he was seen as a threat. Um, he becomes a Messiah in 30 CE, which is the Common Era, which is to me is 30 AD, which is Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, into Jerusalem during Passover. Now, here's a map of Judea and Galilee at the time of Jesus. Now, we know Jesus as an historical figure as well as a spiritual figure, but we're going to concentrate on the historical since this is a World History 1 course. And as you can see from the map, it was Judea right along the coast. Had a small section along the coast. Okay, because of his teaching and because he was deemed a threat to the Roman Empire, the Pharisees, who were the Jewish elders, had Jesus arrested by Pontius Pilate, who was the governor of Judea, and he was crucified. And they named him the Christ, which meant the Anointed One. Now, in religious aspects, now I am a Christian, but this is a history class. Like I said, they believed he was the Anointed One. So Jesus Christ, Jesus, the Anointed One, is what his name means. Uh, uh, what he did, a lot that we know about Jesus comes from the Dead Sea Scrolls. These were papyrus um, rolls that were spread out. They used to write on papyrus rolls, and they were hidden in a cave, and they were discovered in the late 1940s. And that's how we know a lot about Jesus' life and a lot about the scriptures. Um, Rome did not have a very strong control over Judea. That's why they considered Christianity to be a threat, and Christians would be persecuted later on, as we're going to see. There were zealots who sought to expel the Romans by force. The Jewish temple was destroyed in 66 to 70 AD, and then Jerusalem was destroyed from 132 to 135 AD to kind of destroy uh, anything that had to do with a monotheistic God, including Judaism. Judaism, monotheism, and the covenant, interpreting the covenant. The first 5 books of the Bible, we know them as the Old Testament. Well, they are the Torah in the Jewish faith. That's all these Hasidic Jews that you see that wear the black hats and have little curls down their side. They are the ones that actually teach the Torah. Okay, the Sadducees was a hereditary temple priesthood and aristocratic guardians. Now, a lot of times the Jews have been um, discriminated against throughout history because of they have been blamed for the death of Jesus. There is some truth to that, and what happens is Christianity goes underground. They go into the catacombs of Rome, which are tunnels that were underneath Rome at the time. And this is a fresco from that time. Artists would go under there and they would draw things about Christianity. We know a lot about it because of these frescoes and because also of the Dead Sea Scrolls, how the Christians were actually persecuted against by the Romans and other people. So when you look at art from that period, it depicts the persecution quite well. The Pharisees were interpreters of religious law. And, there's a little, how can I put this? There is a little, you know, everybody has different interpretations. So why leave the interpretation up to one person? All right, or even a group of people. Interpretation is kind of a personal thing. When you read the Bible, that's your interpretation. The Essenes were a radical splinter group, spiritual deliverance through asceticism, and what they wanted to do was they wanted to actually use violence to get Rome to leave. Jesus is a controversial figure. He was the Messiah promised by God to deliver Israel. There's a reinterpretation of Jesus' role as a Messiah in Greek mythology. Now, one of the apostles, one of the more influential apostles of Jesus, was St. Paul. He was born Saul of Tarsus. Tarsus is a small city in Asia Minor, and he converted to Christianity. He declared himself to be the apostle to the Gentiles. He rejected Jewish law as irrelevant to salvation. Christianity is based upon that dogma of salvation. How you act during your life, how do you treat other people during your life, how do you develop your character during your life actually has to do with salvation. He made converts among Greek-speaking Jewish communities throughout Asia Minor and throughout Asia, because he kind of showed them that God was a loving God, and he gave his only son for all the sins of man. Sacrificed his only son. Now, who would do that? So it had a great appeal to people as a major religion. Now, this is a depiction on another fresco of Paul of Tarsus, actually Saul of Tarsus, and he was, like I said, he was a great messenger of the Lord. He was a great messenger of Jesus, and he helped spread the word. He converted people to Christianity. Of course, again, Christianity was an underground religion. It had to be, because people would be persecuted and even killed because of their Christian beliefs. This is a map of Paul's journeys. You can see how far he went. He went, from the Middle East all through Asia, up to southern Europe, into Italy, all the way up to Rome, preaching. Excuse me. And it was a good religion. It's a great religion. I mean, if you look at it from its humble beginnings, he proved things to people every day. I mean, like I said, there's a thin line between that spiritual Jesus and the historical Jesus. The growth of Christianity in the Hellenistic world. Christian appeal also had a communal aspect. It brought communities together as well. And the organizational structure was, well, there wasn't a lot of it because the church had no hierarchy yet. I mean, how do you determine who's a cardinal? How do you determine who's the pope? Is it the person that's most spiritual or the most Christian? It's difficult to ascertain. The role of women in the church actually began to follow what Mary Magdalene did. And Mary Magdalene was, of course, we believe that she was a reformed prostitute from the world's oldest profession. It appealed to a broad range of social classes. And it did, because everyone's equal in the eyes of the Lord. And there was a promise of salvation. All these other religions didn't promise salvation. Roman religions, I'm not quite sure if they promised a heaven, or I know they had Elysian Fields, which was a place where you went after you died, but there were so many things that were involved, because God spoke to Jesus, Jesus spoke to his followers, and his followers picked it up. And the message, you know how if you tell a secret on one side of a room and then by the time it gets to the other side of the room, it's a different secret? The message stayed the same no matter how many people actually converted to Christianity. Now, again, we see a map of Judea in the time of Jesus. How did Christianity go up against like Judaism and and other religions. It won over. There was a lot of hostility between the Jews and Christians at the time because a lot of them didn't understand the role of a Messiah. If you look at the Judaism, there's a lot of people that believe Jesus Christ within Judaism was the Messiah. These are called Messianic Jews. And what happens is they begin to be ostracized because they're believing in something that's other than what's taught in Judaism. How do you understand the Messiah? What does the Messiah do? What is the Messiah's role when they come back down to earth? They save people. And how long does he stay away before he actually comes before the second coming? We're going to go into Christianity and the Roman Empire. It was treated early appearance of Christianity with indifference. They didn't really care. The Romans didn't really care. They didn't see it as a threat immediately. Persecutions were intermittent and short-lived. By 300, 1 to 5% of total Roman population were perhaps Christian. Now that's a lot because the Romans practiced polytheism. They had gods for everything, and now there's one God. And so the Romans looked at it with some sort of suspicion, like it was almost sedition, that it was treasonous to be a Christian. But there was a dramatic period of growth, and I always tell my students, especially when we look at world history, if you look at the origins of religion from the beginning of time, it is a feeling of hope. Think about this. You have someone who's working in a field, and they hope for a better life. Well, how is it going to come if they feel like what they're doing now is virtually hopeless? Well, from hope stems religion or faith. Okay? Christianity was no longer Roman-centered, which means that it was spread all over the empire, so it didn't center on the Roman Empire. There was a increasing burden of imperial administration by 300 AD, and the reason being is that in the Roman Empire, they were taxing people more and more for armies that were no longer stronger, and they were losing battles. And eventually, the Roman Empire would crumble from within, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit. Difficulties were masked by the period of the 5 good emperors. They were good emperors, but they really didn't make that much of a difference. It just seemed like there was a radical change in the government of the Roman Empire. The Severan dynasty emerged after a period of 5 good emperors, and there was a question of legitimate succession. And Europe would go through this a little bit later when we get to the 16th and 17th century. If you take World History 2 with me, you'll notice that as well. There was a period of civil war, and Septimius Severus emerges as the leader. It seems that in Rome, throughout its long history, that there was always 2 different factions jockeying for power. In this one, there was a civil war, and Severus emerges as the leader, but we start to see a steady decline in the Roman Empire. What Severus did was he had a transition from Roman rule. He did not regard Rome as the center of imperial rule. Well, why should he? The Roman Empire spread all over the known world into the Middle East and even into southern Europe and as far away as England. So it was called Britannia. He ruled through the army. That's not necessarily a good thing because it demonstrates paranoia from a ruler who does that, because he doesn't trust anybody else. Caracalla succeeds Severus and extends Roman citizenship throughout the empire. Normally, you didn't get Roman citizenship unless you were actually born in the Roman Empire, no matter where it was. But now he's starting to extend Roman citizenship all over the place. Why? Because they need taxes. You can only tax the citizens, see? Increase the tax base and enfranchise the army. Now you start having foreigners in your army. Well, what do they have? What do they have to gain? Well, if you have somebody who's in your army that's not really Roman, they're not going to be very loyal. And troops didn't make a lot of money back then. And in fact, if you enlisted in the Roman army, you had to do 20 years before you retired. Now think about that in the days of all these wars that are going on, the brutal wars. You're fighting with a sword. Okay? The centrality of the army as a political instrument. This is dangerous to have the army as a political instrument. And the reason why I say that is that if you politicize the military, you weaken your military. Instead of making them loyal to one country or one state, you're making them loyal to a particular ideal, which is wrong because the state is not an ideal. Okay? At the end, we're going to talk about the end of the Roman peace between 235 and 284 CE AD. They had the barracks emperors who claimed authority. There was a 3rd century crisis with an overwhelming burden of empire. This is where, like I said before, in between 200 and 300 AD, we start to see the beginning of the end of the Roman Empire because of they're overstretching themselves. If you look at where Rome is, they're overstretching themselves up to England, into the Middle East, into Germany, which they called Germania. And there was economic and administrative challenges. Add to that, the army is very politicized. There was a period of poverty, famine, and disease. And as a ruler, that's difficult to fight. It's difficult to fight. It's a massive challenge. Okay? Diocletian comes to the throne in 230. Actually, he was born in 236. Comes to the throne in 284 AD to 305. And people called him Dominus, which means Lord, which was a different title for Roman emperors at the time. They were normally known as Sire or Caesar or that particular style. And he had a Persian style of ceremonial deference at court. He took steps to define formal rules of imperial succession. Now, imperial succession is very important because you got to know who's going to succeed you. Whether they're going to destroy any reforms that you make, whether they are going to continue the policies that you had while you were emperor. All right, so that was important. So Diocletian did that. He divided the realm in half. This was the first time this was ever seen in Roman history. You had the Western Roman Empire, which was from like the middle of the Mediterranean all the way over to modern day Britain, and the eastern half, which was all the way in the Middle East. The western capital was in Rome. The western capital was in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul in present day Turkey. Diocletian took the wealthier eastern half, and Maxentius took the western half, and they had what they call the Tetrarchy, which was the rule of 4. There were 4 people that actually ruled Rome at the time. And they permitted a degree of decentralization, and it was designed to end succession disputes. Well, if you have one large empire, somebody can get really, really hungry. And if you have a question of succession, you can also have another civil war. So Diocletian wanted to end that. So as emperor, he took the richest half of the empire and gave the poorest half to Maxentius, which was Rome. Now, this is probably the opposite. Rome should have been the richest, but it wasn't. Here is a map of Diocletian's division of the empire in 304 AD. And as you'll see, he ruled the eastern half, nothing but sand, really, spices, certain grains, while in the western half you have a lot of agriculture, rich farmland, fertile farmland. So who won out in this? It's difficult to tell, but if you split the empire in two, it's easier to rule. That was the that was the smartest thing that Diocletian did. Diocletian separated military from civilian chains of command. Okay, so he's depoliticizing the military. He stabilized the currency and had a new system of taxation where taxes were lowered Okay, and when you lower taxes, that creates a better economy. Your economy begins to grow. Why? Because people have leftover money, and if they have leftover money, they're going to spend it in for luxury items. Believe it or not, he ruled from Nicomedia in Asia Minor and retires at Split in Croatia in 305. So this actually had a happy ending. Instead of him being murdered or dying in battle, he retired in 305. This is the Tetrarchy, Diocletian and his colleagues. This is a statue of them that you see right there. And the Romans were always quick to monumentalize their leaders through statues and works of art. At the beginning of the 4th century, Rome was less than 5% Christian. Christianity began to have an impact. Began to have an impact both spiritually and, believe it or not, politically. All right, and societally as well. Diocletian was opposed to any group perceived as subversive, and Christians were seen as subversive because, like I said, the Romans were polytheistic at the time. So as they're seen as polytheistic, if you're not loyal to Rome's gods, then you're not a loyal Roman citizen. So they take religion and citizenship in one hand. You might say hand in hand. This is when it began the great persecution of Christians. Results in increased interest in social justice and equality. It increased an interest in Christianity and coincides with the emergence of Neoplatonism. Now, if you pay attention to something that is perceived as rebellious, sometimes it gives it a lot of publicity, whether it be negative publicity or positive publicity. It still gives it publicity, and people ask questions about it. They want to know about it, and that's what happened with Christianity. And then it began to have more converts. Constantine was the emperor that succeeded Diocletian. Now Diocletian was very persecutive against he persecuted the Christians. But Constantine would take a different approach. He had a vision at Milvian Bridge where he saw an angel that was going to help him win a battle in 312. He was preparing to march on Italy and claim power, and he saw this vision before the battle, and in this sign you will conquer. That's what he saw. So he placed Christian symbols on banners and shields, and he attempted to curry favor with local Christian warriors, and the true motives of his conversion are unclear, but he allegedly had a religious conversion, so he converts to Christianity. Now, whether this was an attempt to get Christians on his side is unclear, but he actually converted to Christianity. Now, when you see the emperor converting to Christianity, you think it's okay. So the rest of the Romans believe it was all right to convert to Christianity if the emperor was doing it. But it's not that they didn't make it legal. It's just that the emperor was converting to Christianity. Okay, he was victorious in battle and rewarded the Christian clergy. He rewarded Christian priests or monks or whoever it was at that time, patronized constructions of churches throughout the empire. So with Constantine, the Christians inadvertently had found an ally that was going to help them spread the word of Christianity. He issued the Edict of Milan, guaranteeing freedom of worship throughout the empire, and made Christianity a favored religion. The Edict of Milan made the freedom of religion. Whether you were Christian or not, you could worship the way you wanted, and you were protected by the emperor himself. So we see Christianity almost go full circle at this time. From imperial sect to imperial institution, Christianity grew organically, not designed as a religious system. It was designed as a faith system. Constantine's conversion requires systemization, and the institutionalization of the church presents challenges. Now, because of Constantine's advocation of or advocacy of Christianity. That's why we see Rome as the capital of the Vatican, because that's where the church is going to be built. There were doctrinal quarrels between the Arians and the Athanasians about the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And there was an importance about getting to the orthodoxy, which means the fundamentals of the church. Here we have another fresco that shows you a Christian love feast. Christianity was all about loving thy neighbor and doing unto the neighbor as if you would have done unto you. Christian theology and the classical tradition. In the Council of Nicaea in 325, Arian heresy is condemned, and the emperor presided over councils. So we see the emperor maybe metamorphosizing into the first pope. Okay, but that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is they're going to get somebody who is a true blue Christian to be the pope. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. The growth of the ecclesiastical organization, there was a distinction between the clergy, who are priests, and the laity, who are the people that worship in the Christian church. The hierarchical organization is that there's a distinction in rank, and this is the Pope. The Pope is the Bishop of Rome. Not necessarily the whole Catholic Church, but the Bishop of Rome. And we start to see the Patrine succession, which talks about how new popes become elected because popes can't have kids. Well, not now,